Hello, math analysis. Welcome to lesson P.5B, where we're going to continue solving equations numerically and mostly algebraically. So to get things started, first thing we're going to talk about, last time we talked about solving them graphically, and we talked about extracting the square roots, where we just had a perfect square, so we were able to do the square root in order to solve our equation. So today, we're going to take that a step further. We're still going to extract the square roots, but what we're going to do is we're going to force our quadratic equation to be a complete, beautiful, lovely square. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we don't have a coefficient in front of our x squared. We're also going to make sure that we move, usually we have it equal to 0, but we're going to move our c over to the other side. So what we'll then do is take that middle term, that b, and we'll cut it in half and square it to make a perfect square trinomial. Just keep in mind, if you add that to one side, you have to add it to the other. So then at that point, I can clean up on the right side as much as possible. And then over here, I can collapse it down into a perfect square. So I'll factor it. Instead of x squared plus bx plus the square of b over 2, I can just collapse it down and factor it. So I have x plus b over 2, the whole thing squared. So what I would like you to do is to try this technique on this particular problem. As always, hit pause to try it out, and then hit play when you're ready to check your work. So for me, my first step in all of this was to get it to match what I wanted. I want to get my x squared all alone. I also want to move my c over so it's out of the way. So the first thing I did was I divided everything by 4. Of course, that means that 4 disappears. Negative 20 divided by 4 gives me a negative 5. And 17 divided by 4 is, unfortunately, just ugly 17 over 4. And then remember how we want our c to be on the other side, so I subtracted that 17 over 4. So now it's in the format where I can actually complete the square. So I'm going to take this middle term, that negative 5, I'm going to cut it in half and square it, so 5 divided by 2, and negative 5, sorry, divided by 2 and square it, and I'm going to add that onto both sides, because what you do to one side, you must do to the other. Now that I've done that, I can collapse it down into a perfect square. Now I know it says to do x plus b over 2, but remember how our b was negative, so it ends up being x minus 5 over 2 all squared. The cool thing is on this other side, if you were to grab a calculator and work all of this out, you would find out that it all actually adds up to 2. Just don't lose your negative on that 17 and it should work out just fine. Now you guys know you can undo a square by doing the square root. Just if you do it to one side, you must do it to the other. Just don't forget that we have the positive square root of 2 and the negative square root of 2. At this point, I'm just going to do what I did yesterday. I'm going to add both sides, 5 over 2 to both sides, and that means I have x equals 5 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. If you want, you could grab a calculator, and if I grabbed a calculator, I know 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So if I did 2.5 plus the square root of 2, my calculator tells me I get 3.91. And if I did 2.5 minus the square root of 2, my calculator tells me I get about 1.09. Now, a lot of people don't like completing the square because it does have a lot of steps and it does get messy. So it turns out that a really particular form of completing the square is a form that you know really well, and that is the quadratic formula. The solutions of the quadratic equation, where you have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, please notice it always needs to equal 0. You can find them with the quadratic formula, and I will sing it for you. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I hope you enjoyed that. The cool thing about this quadratic formula is, of course, it works for any quadratic equation. It works every time. It works for everybody. It'll even tell you if you don't have any solutions, there's a way to discover that as well. So a lot of people really like the quadratic formula because it works every time. It can get a little messy, but it always works, and that's kind of nice. Very convenient. Just watch your negatives and you should be okay. So I would like you to use the quadratic formula to solve this particular equation. Once again, hit pause to try it out and then hit play when you're ready to check your work. So to start off with, I can see that my A is going to be 2, my B is going to be 3, and my C is going to be a -5 because that is a -5. So with that in mind, I'm going to plug into my formula. So negative B gives me -3. Plus or minus B squared means plus or minus 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times -5, all in the square root, all over 2 times a, which in this case is 2. And it looks scary, but if you clean it up, it's not bad. You know 3 squared is 9. -4 times a +2 gives us a -8 times a -5 gives us a +40. So 9 plus 40 means I end up with 49 inside of my square root. And of course, on the bottom, 2 times 2 is 4. You know the square root of 49 is 7. Just keep in mind it could be a +7 or a -7. So if I do -3 plus 7, I get 4 divided by 4 gives me 1. If I do -3 minus 7, I get -10 over 4, which simplifies down to -5/2. Or you could have written it as -2.5. That would have been okay as well. So this means we now have a whole bunch of different ways to solve a quadratic equation algebraically. This doesn't even include the fact that we were solving them graphically yesterday. So there are 4 basic ways to solve quadratic equations algebraically. You can do it by factoring, which we did yesterday. You can do it by extracting the square roots, which we did yesterday. You can do it by completing the square, where we have that whole b over 2 squared thing happening, which we did today, and by using the quadratic formula, which we also did today. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You might want to do whatever it takes to memorize it. And if singing a little dumb song works, then that's what we do. So as always, I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, please email me or come see me after school Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll see you soon. Bye.